Having discussed already the notion of sutra last night, that certain guidance took place in a sense that there is open pattern and good news that it is possible to attain enlightenment. It is possible. It is not only hypothetical concept. So, having already related with the basic notion of sutra as being part of one's communication to the teaching, understanding of the teaching, that although we have discussed, as we have discussed last night, that there was very little material that has been translated into the English language, or for that matter into the French or the German, but still the dynamite exists, and that creates enormous spark of energy. And it may be that a person can experience the heart of the teaching directly, precisely, and thoroughly, rather than trying to get into the swimming into the sutras, the numerous sutras, which would be like swimming in the ocean. And if you have no idea as to where's the shore, where's the beginning of the sea, the ocean, that you could lose yourself in millions of sutras, which would be very difficult to work with and sort out. So that is why the Bodhisattva path becomes extremely important at this point. And the Bodhisattva path is to captivating all the principles that Buddha has taught and trying to bring it into a workable living situation, to inspire oneself, having gone through the Hinayana disciplines already, then person begin to raise his consciousness, if you like to call it, or inspiration, or pride, faith, whatever, that he begin to, or she for that matter, begin to evolve itself into a sense of hope. And that particular hope does not become ego reinforcement hope as such particularly, but that hope becomes a hope of willing to lose ego and willing to jump into the pattern of the teachings. That there is new openness begin to take place. And having disciplined already in the experience of Hinayana completely, fully, a student begin to realize the enormous irony from the point of view that whether you are the path or whether you are trotting on the path, that you begin to lose the reference point Some points maybe you find yourself being the path itself. Sometimes you find yourself the traveler on the path at the same time. There is a lot of humor involved with that particular situation and the whole thing. As we go on to the basic situation of inspiration, that a person begin to realize that the narrowness and the strictness of the particular discipline that he has gone through already, has left him with enormous impression that there is no other way than discipline, very simple discipline, direct discipline, discipline without any preconceptions, discipline without any particular color or fantasy, but direct discipline, working with the practice of shamatha and vipassana experience, and knowing the nature of reality as they are, as Buddha presented in the terms of the 3 marks of existence. So the student begin to lift his heart, begin to stick his neck out, slight more. So far what you saw is the texture of the path. Your head is bending a little bit, you begin to see the texture of the path. Now the student begin to raise his head a little bit and they begin to see there's a horizon and there is the meeting point of sky and earth. He's begin to see that and he has every right to see that. And his capability of seeing that. And it is certain that when student is involved that way, that it is certain that student wouldn't tip over on his trotting on the path, that he can take care of his walking situation very beautifully, precisely, and moreover he had developed a new kind of genius, which is that he can walk and he can look far at the same time, which is an extremely fantastic thing. And it's a result of expanding one's consciousness to the Mahayana path, openness, complete openness, which becomes extremely powerful and very real at the same time. The first step of entering into the Mahayana path is that of realizing the openness, the open path. Having already developed some sense of relationship with oneself and one's phenomena world, through the practice of Hinayana discipline, that student begin to commit himself into the Bodhisattva path. And the first step in committing into the Bodhisattva path, as it had been described in the books, the scriptures, sutras, that Bodhisattva, would-be Bodhisattva, or student of a Mahayana discipline, begin to transplant new heart in himself. You might ask from where he's transplanting this particular heart. Well, from the inspiration and experience that there is a genuine discipline taking place. You are not trying to kid yourself, you are not trying to please yourself in a very frivolous way. You have found basic experience of Buddha nature in you through your discipline of Hinayana practice, having found it in such a way that you begin to realize that you can borrow all the hearts of the Buddhas of the 10 quarters of the universe and the Bodhisattvas. You take their hearts out and transplant in your heart. That is the basic notion of inspiration, that faith and trust that there was heart already, and now you are transplanting that particular heart in your system, in your basic being, in your mind. And transplanting this particular heart is known as taking a Bodhisattva vow, which is to say that from now until attainment of enlightenment, that I will take this vow of Bodhisattva's path. I'm going to commit myself into the Bodhisattva's path. And from now until all sentient beings are liberated, that I keep this vow. And also I keep a vow that I will not attain enlightenment until all sentient beings have been saved from the misery of samsara. Transplanting heart into your system means that it has twofold situations. One is called a memba, which is a wish or the inspiration that you would like to work for all sentient beings. Another one is called CHOGYAM, which is entering into the Bodhisattva's path by applications of 6 paramitas: generosity, discipline, patience, exertion, meditation, knowledge, and so forth. I'm entering into this particular state of commitment, which is a full commitment. Commitment is very powerful because that you have a long time ago, by the trotting on the basic Buddhist discipline, you have realized that you don't have entity or existence as such as me and my ego as such at all. And when there's nothing to collect the commitment into a certain particular point of reference in one's state of mind, the commitment becomes a wide commitment rather than concentrate in the one spot. And we have to nurse that particular one spot, cherish it at all. That the commitment is open commitment, extremely wide commitment. That commitment to the cosmos, the universe. You can do this because you don't exist. If you exist, then there is still some kind of grudge against somebody or other. Maybe it is yourself or your little corners of irritations that involved. So you can't commit yourself totally, completely, extensively at all. So from that point of view, the commitment becomes a very real commitment, which is called taking bodhicitta in your heart. Bodhi means awakened state of mind. Citta means heart. The heart of the awakened state of mind has entered into your system. That at that point you have become the follower of a Mahayana path, as well as you have joined the families of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. And such commitment is not only to save oneself, in fact not at all, but you have something to give to sentient beings. You have evolved yourself spiritually enough so that you can give what you have gained to sentient beings. That's the purpose of the Bodhisattva vow, is that you are going to become a teacher and at the same time remaining as student at the same time. You are going to be the guide for this particular tour, as well as you are yourself a tourist. And I think that notion is very important, particularly from the Mahayanist point of view, that once you begin to develop your sense of individuality in egohood, that you can't develop a wider vision. Absolutely not at all. But when you begin to lose the sense of individuality, a sense of a purpose, a discipline, a journey as such at all, then something else begins to open, which is a much wider range, complete open range, has no limitations, none whatsoever. That Bodhisattva, would-be Bodhisattva, become a warrior. That's the basic metaphor, is that now you become a warrior. And your vision is completely extended and opened to the level of that you don't have any vision on whatsoever. And that in itself is so inspiring and very humorous, at the same time magnificent. Actually, literally, you can feel it physically, personally, that you have stepped out of something and now you begin to relate to yourself with the whole world, whole universe. It becomes extremely powerful. At the same time, of course, it becomes somewhat painful that you have taken this burden onto yourself and you refuse to share it with anybody at all. And the reason why the Bodhisattva, would-be Bodhisattvas or the students of Mahayanists kept away from being evangelical or hysterical or what you call extremely orthodox and doctrinal pride, is because that you begin to realize that you are not saving anybody, not even yourself. There is a very interesting dichotomy in the Buddhist term, Buddhist way of looking at it. In the one end, complete dichotomy that you have no idea what you are doing. You have no understanding. Only thing you know is your own suffering and pain, and egoless. Apart from that, there's no further understanding, none whatsoever. But on the other hand, beyond that, there is enormous understanding and a complete comprehension of something or other is happening. So if you're trying to captivate those experiences on notebook or into a jam jar, if you try to catch the experience and keep it in your refrigerator, it is impossible to do that. And sometimes you begin to feel that you're fooling yourself, which is quite rightly so. But on the other hand, you are not fooling yourself, which is also quite rightly so. And there is very interesting dichotomy there, that the vision of extension and a wide approach and a universal vision is fantastic. But at the same time, there's overlay of chaos and confusion as to how to proceed, even how to begin one's journey at all is confusing. But according to Buddhist path, that such confusion is cut through discipline of generosity. That's the first step of the Bodhisattva's path, of Paramitas, of the transcendental actions. The first one is generosity. Generosity without expectation. I wouldn't quite call it love. I wouldn't quite call it as serious matter. But generosity here has The nature of generosity, as has been explained in the scriptures, is purified threefold ways. You are empty. The action is empty. The person to practice your generosity is also empty. They don't really exist, they don't really happen. But in the state of a non-existence, non-happening, that situations exist. Because situations are very clear and very clean and pure. If the activities of generosity happens to be very definite and very precise from the point of view of actually it is taking place, and you feel good about it, you begin to congratulate yourself about it, then the problem might rise is that you are still working on a Hinayana path, and a path that is deliberate. In fact, you even haven't got to Hinayana path at all. It's just in the path of confused world. That generosity without expectation, without expecting anything in return, but at the same time, enormous sense of generosity, openness, all kinds of experience involved with that is sometimes you feel like it, sometimes you don't feel like it, sometimes you feel you are not up to it. But however, the demand is coming to you that you let yourself take a Bodhisattva vow, and you have done it. And now it is impossible to chickening out. And the discipline is coming at you, to you, rather than you are trying to discipline the whole thing. And you can't say what you have done with taking Bodhisattva vow and everything was a rehearsal. And actually it is happening precisely directly to you. So generosity is a sense of a non-returning attitude, that you don't expect anything in return, to congratulate how generous you were, that one doesn't expect that when a person would dedicate the piece of art in your name, or stone tablets that pasted on a certain building that you gave generously your money to. You don't expect those. And if you look at closely, those things becomes very corny and completely secular and confused and stupid, rather than the Bodhisattva's way, that you need your title, acknowledgement constantly. So at this point, generosity is completely open generosity, without expectations of any kind. And the second paramita is that of discipline, or shila, which means morality, discipline. And also it means holding together, abiding according to the law, or abiding according to the restrictions. And it's a very definite one, and very direct one, that if you're speeding on the highway, that somebody comes to you and catch you for that, that there is a definite message that how unaware of yourself, or aggressively, deliberately ignoring the law. And this particular law and this particular discipline goes much more than purely somebody finds you speeding, which is a very crude version of a discipline at this point of view. But at this point, discipline is very personal, extremely personal, that contains all kinds of messages all the time. Once you're involved with a practice of some kind, according to the Hinayana and the Mahayana work, you begin to find yourself being subject to accidents of all kinds, psychologically, physically, all kinds. That you are unaware of yourself, that you have a fight with your husband, and you're trying to hit your husband with the kettle that is sitting on your stove, and you pick it up, hold it up, and you think you're going to throw it at him, but in turn you get burnt by the hot water inside. And you had a hot argument with your colleague, and you would like to storm out of his room, his office, whatever. And you close the door and catch your finger in it. There's all kinds of messages happening, taking place all the time. Constantly happening all the time. It's very real. The discipline, the message for the discipline comes from phenomena world and how you relate with the phenomena world. And it is not creation of a God or local spirits, or for that matter, it is not activities of Buddhas of the past, present, and future. But it is a life situation that is giving you a message, a very strong message, a definite message, that if you lax, you're being reminded constantly, all the time. And you find all kinds of little messages taking place, happening all the time. And such discipline is not so much controlling yourself alone, but lack of relating with somebody else, failing to communicate spiritually to somebody, and failing to expand yourself, open yourself, as well as failing to control yourself up to a certain point. But all of those are part of the discipline, Shila Paramita. The next one is patience. Which is misunderstood greatly when we talk about usually. And as it was said that patience is a virtue, virtue is grace. Somehow that whole thing is misunderstood. Patience is not necessarily virtue, particularly, and the patience doesn't particularly belong to the category of virtue or goodness, but the patience belongs to the category of a true, truthful, absolute, rather than the side of the virtue as such particularly, or for that matter, and the relation of grace, whatever that may be. it's true that the truth we are talking about in terms of passion, of patience. The truth is a very big topic, seemingly, and everybody becomes very serious as soon as we begin to discuss the truth, and nobody would smile. And truth from this point of view is reality that could be worked with, that reality that is experiential, and reality that does not need any reinforcement. Absolute reality means it stands in its own. So does the patient stand in its own. You don't have to be patient because you've been told to be patient, or you feel it would be good to have a patience. And that would be just, instead of eating and settling down and eating breakfast, lunch and dinner, that you are just nibbling all the day long. And patience from that point of view is very direct and very definite. Not a question of trying to be good, not particularly trying to be virtuous as such, but the definition of a patient according to the scriptures is non-aggression, is the patience. Non-aggression is the patience. When we talk about aggression here, we are not only talking about losing your temper and suddenly you're blowing up, but we are talking about non-aggression in the sense of a constant flow of experience in our life. Constant flow of experience in our life. That the constant in our life contains little flicker of aggression here and there that we don't like. Certain things are presented to us. We don't like certain things that we experience. That we begin to put ourselves into a state of experience. Nobody told you to do it, but we are beginning to do it. And we have an opinion of ourselves, certain expectation of ourselves. And if that expectation doesn't meet with what you're getting, if your hot tea is cold, and if your iced tea is hot, you get mad at it. If you're courageous enough, you would like to speak to the manager. That is aggression. I'm not saying particularly that your iced tea should be hot or your hot tea should be cold particularly. That's not the issue particularly at this point. I think anyway you are intelligent enough to not take it too literally. But however, there's that continual aggression that takes place all the time. Based on expectations. And expectations are basically aggressive. And you expect something, you want to get something out of that. It's not very generous. It's not open. There's a sense of aggressiveness constantly all the time. constant and all the time, sense of enormous aggression. You see, basically, that we begin to feel that we are rather sensitive. Even if you regard yourself as a very tough person, but still, nevertheless, that we are softened by our ego, that we are very sensitive, extremely sensitive. And when we begin to meet little irritations here and there, not only that, but when we expect something would go smooth, and then we begin to meet with expectations, which goes the opposite way, that our expectations are completely devastated, that we get the opposite. And you begin to shape yourself before you get to the place, before you get something you want. We begin to shape ourselves that way constantly. That if we are going to get espresso coffee, shall we say, and you order it, and somebody takes a note and going to bring it to you, and between the time when you get the espresso coffee is ordered and before you get, we begin to soften ourselves, begin to shape ourselves like espresso coffee drinker. We become that way. We begin to give into it. We begin to make ourselves softened and aggressively demanding, ready to be attacked. If you don't get espresso coffee, you expect it. Or if something slightest wrong, we begin to shape ourselves that way. That extends in great details of all kinds of things that in life, that when we push the button, we shape ourselves, make ourselves soft very aggressively, and expecting that you're going to get something out of it. If you don't get something out of it, then we have already worked out our plan of how we're going to attack, how we're going to demand. And that is non-discipline, non-patient. That the patient does not contain expectations, but the patient, the highest form of a patient is non-aggression, non-expectation. That doesn't mean to say that one has to become a robot, a stone wall particularly, but one has some sense of intelligence, some sense of openness, but at the same time there's a sense of continuity, that your whole life is based on that particular patience, not expecting anything, but prepare for everything at the same time. And that kind of preparation is not regarded as aggression. That kind of preparation is regarded as the inspiration of faith and a trust that's been described in the scriptures. The next paramita is virya, or exertion. Exertion from this point of view is a question of celebration. The sense of celebration takes place because the activities that you are involved contains freshness constantly in your life. That everyday life situation may be repetitive in a basic pattern, but at the same time there's a spark of a color happening all the time. That exertion is joy, or rather than that question of like you're being in a concentration camp or labor camp. But exertion at this point is a sense of openness, sense of joy, sense of celebration, and moreover a sense of humor at the same time. That there is a lot of dignity in terms of practice that you are doing, at work you're involved, there's a sense of openness happening all the time. So you are tuning yourself into that particular situation. It's a sense of exertion and openness. And once you are interested and open, and once you begin to take the notion of a celebration, you can work 24 hours a day. And one becomes completely industrious and a complete hard worker at the same time, which is another meaning of vriya, tsendu, which also means hard working. And one should understand that quite clearly. It's not a question of driving yourself mad and being a hard worker, but a sense of a celebration is taking place. So therefore there is a sense of exertion is taking place constantly as well. And next paramita is that of meditation, or concentration rather, of dhyana, which is the same word as Zen. And at this point is a question of accuracy, awareness, total awareness taking place throughout the whole day, all the time, not particularly making oneself feel better because you're aware of yourself, grinning yourself constantly, or frowning yourself at yourself constantly, but just being constantly there, precisely right there. Whatever happens, you are right there. And the openness takes place constantly, all the time, which can only develop by experiencing the Hinayana discipline of shamatha, development of peace, and vipassana, a development of insight. It can take only place at that level. That there is a sense of a constant continuity can be only found if there is a particular sitting practice of a discipline, meditation takes place, and then the result of that you begin to also tune yourself greater. The sitting practice and day-to-day living experience become very close. The boundaries becomes fuzzy, so that you can work, you can experience that kind of state of concentration or stable thinking is taking place. Another word of the concentration or dhyana is in Tibetan, which means is samten, which means sam or sampa, which is thought process, cognitive mind. Ten, which means stable. So you have a stable cognitive mind that's taking place without being wavered by neurosis or impulse of all kinds. And stable, steady process is taking place all the time. And next paramita is being prajna, or transcendental knowledge. We have a difficulty in using this term in the English language, that prajna or shirap in Tibetan, which simply means the best of understanding, the best of knowledge. Like ordinarily you would say, in the best of my knowledge, I think that he's my father. As far as I can think, as far as I understood, in the similarly that she rap means best. She is knowledge, knowing, like ngoshipa, that I know you, I met you before, so I know you will be introduced. And there's a sense of knowing something, that something more than purely cognitive mind is registering, but the cognitive mind is acknowledging that person has been there before, which is related with the memory of some kind, the memory bank, as well as personal experience of the present situation reinforces that memory. So from that point of view, prajna, pra means the best, jna, which means knowledge at the same time. And some translators use term wisdom and like perfection of wisdom or transcendental wisdom for word for prajna, which seem to be not quite accurate. And there's a general tradition of theistic and non-theistic discipline and their way to view the world, their way to view the universe and knowledge and wisdom generally, that when we talk about in terms of purely theistic level, that we begin to regard the wisdom is the first thing, and knowledge then comes, gnosis happens afterwards. The wisdom comes the final thing. Of the beginner's point of level, that first of all you gain wisdom of certain particular knowledge, and then you begin to finally you gain the knowledge. And that seems to be a theistic approach from the basis of that. In order to understand the knowledge of God, you have to have a wisdom to know that. But from the point of view of non-theistic, such as like Buddhist tradition, seem to work differently. That first you have to have a knowledge. If you don't have a knowledge, you have no idea how to handle yourself. The knowledge of riding horse, the knowledge of driving motor car, but it is not the wisdom of driving motor car and the wisdom of riding horse, which is seem to be very heavy-handed, because horse is not regarded as a mystical experience, but it's a real thing that sits there and you have to ride over it. And driving cars there geared with all kinds of gadgets there, and it's waiting to be driven. Nothing mystical particularly. So it's knowledge of a driving car is the first thing that happens. And then once you have knowledge of the driving car, knowledge of riding horse, then you begin to gain wisdom how to conduct the whole situation, how to feel the car, how to feel your horse. And you begin to become a wise rider, wise driver, eventually. And that seems to be a very theistic, non-theistic approach of a direct, literal approach, existential level. So therefore, prajna is regarded as a direct experience which has nothing to do with the theistic discipline, but non-theistic approach of things as they are, prajna, and the best of knowledge. Which is accompanied by a practice of meditation, sense of knowing things as they are, very literally, very directly, very simply, that you begin to relate with the gadgetry of the cosmos, how to handle that gadgetry, how to handle that world, the functions of things as they are. You have to be familiar with it, you have to be confident with it. You can't play trips of it that you've got to renounce the whole thing. Because not only are you inspired to renounce, but you begin to feel that you are intimidated by this gadgetry of the cosmos. Therefore you begin to take safe precaution that I'm going to renounce the world because I don't know how to handle those. I don't like motor cars because I don't know how to operate them. That's not the basis of renunciation, because you'll be intimidated by the world. Therefore you're going to renounce it. That's chickening out rather than liberated. And usually that is the general style that a lot of situations present us, is that when you don't understand something, you put them into a certain particular bag, that it is too complicated, therefore it couldn't be very healthy. We just put aside. And aside it is that you should put that situation into garbage. Because simply you can't understand, simply you can't work out, simply you feel that you are intimidated and you can't handle the whole details. So let's get into something much more pleasant or something different or better, whatever. So that's not the correct way. And particularly this approach is being non-theistic, therefore prajna is exploring, even if you be intimidated in your life situation or experience, the gadgetry of the cosmos are too complicated, let it be complicated, but let us explore, let us look at. And let us sharpen our sword of prajna, sword of knowledge. And let us get into it, let us study, and let us apply our exertion, our patience, our meditation, our generosity, discipline. Let us go through with the whole thing. Let us look at. That doesn't mean to say one has to analyze the whole thing in the professional psychiatrist, psychologist way, or one has to research, work out. You have to put everything in your microscope, as scientists might have done, or you have to use the computer machine to try to program the complications might be solved. But none of those second-hand would help. But it had to be first-hand experience. We are talking about a life, we are not talking about a stuff. Life is not stuff. And it's not thing. It's not third entity. It's first entity, that we are the life. We have a life. And we have all kinds of complications happening in our life. We can't go to the marriage counselors to solve our problem, or we can't go to the scientist, the psychologist, or the masters of religion, spirituality, but we got to do it ourselves. We got to face the whole thing by ourselves, and we are the first person who initiated the situation, and we got to see through the whole thing. So it is necessary to develop that kind of strength and some sense of pride in the positive sense, that seemingly complicated and unworkable, unsolvable, but still, let us look in it, work, explore completely as much as we can, and if you got stuck, then look into why you got stuck and how you got stuck, what is the cause and effect that you got stuck, and then you can go on. And it is possible to work that way. That's prajna. That's not only pure intellect alone, but at the same time it is intuition equally. So that seems to be the Bodhisattva's experience of sixth paramita, is prajna. And that's the application of the Bodhisattva, how he handles the universe, his sentient beings, how to save them, how to work with them. That seems to be the basic point of reference here. Maybe we could have short discussions on that.
Supposing you get stuck somewhere.
I beg your pardon?
Supposing you get stuck somewhere and you sit down and you think about why you got stuck, and you find that you got stuck, say, because you got scared. What's the next step? How do you deal with the fear?
Did you say you were scared? Did you say supposing you got scared?
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, supposing in the spiritual path, or in any situation you care to name, that you run up against something and you run up against it a number of times and you can't get through it, and so you go away from it and you think of why you got stuck, and you discover that you got stuck because of fear. Where do you go from there?
You just go on. That wasn't a big deal. You got scared, that's all. You just go on. And I mean, the whole point is there's no easy way out at all. But nevertheless, if you know that that is the easy way out, at the same time, and you got just a bit of a scared and feels things coming back at you rather than going forward. But the point is just go ahead and do it. Just walk on. Keep trucking.
Rinpoche, what do you mean when you speak of a celebration?
I think that's what we're doing right now.
Is it a feeling?
I think it's feeling, yes. And as well as it's a manifestation of the feeling.
It's feeling good then?
What?
Feeling good.
Feeling good?
Is that what it is?
I don't know about good or bad, but it's a definite expression of startled.
Startled?
Yeah. Apprehensive. Which might be good or bad, I don't know. It depends on the situation. But a sense of being startled, puzzled, then we begin to feel solemn, and we behave solemnly, put our faces solemnly as well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
How does the development of a couple relationship and maybe eventually marriage show as a reflection on the path? How does the development of a couple relationship between a man and a woman and then eventually maybe marriage become a reflection of the path? We haven't heard anything about this so far. It's been something we do. The path is still an individual responsibility, but there hasn't been much mentioned about family relationship as related to the path that I've heard. I was wondering if you might comment on that.
Well, I don't see any particular problems with it being common or not. It's a question of you're working with a lot of people, and you're also working with your husband or your wife at the same time. So I don't see any particular problems. There's some point that your mate becomes a spokesman of the universe for you, because your mate or your friend has been with you for a long time, have knowledge of you inside out, roughly, somewhat. And I think marriage situation is extremely creative from that point of view, that there is a sense of understanding that somebody actually becomes a talking mirror who minds your business.
What about, like, using confusion or having no basis as becoming a basis, like becoming secure in the fact that you're confused.
Can you say that again? I missed the first part.
How do you deal with using constant confusion as a basis in itself, like being secure in the fact that you're always confused or that you have no basis?
Using?
Confusion.
Using confusion? Did you say?
Yeah.
Well, what else do we have? The point is that we should find some working basis as soon as possible. And what else do we have? And it may be the confusion, the first thing, not knowing how to begin. That's the beginning. And I think that's very important, and that's absolutely necessary for everyone to know, that we should find a stepping stone or something rather than trying to look for ideal situation. As people would say that when I retire from my job, I built my house on the beautiful coast, and I plant my garden, and I organize my house, and then I'm really going to sit and meditate. And that is not quite the way. We've got to do it the right way.
Rinpoche,
Yes?
yesterday you said that we have no idea of what enlightenment is.
What?
How do we work? We have no idea of what enlightenment is. That we have no idea of what enlightenment or what the void is.
Yeah.
How do we work with that idea?
How we what?
How do we work with that idea?
Well, we don't have to work with that idea. It becomes an idea anyway. And we just better do something about it rather than trying to think about it. And just we should start at the beginning. You might ask me a question, how are we going to get out of this hole? And first thing I would suggest you is to get up and walk. And not trying to strategize the entrance and the exit outside, but just to stand and walk.
Taking of the Bodhisattva vow as the beginning point of undertaking these 6 paramitas. I mean,
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you?
do you see the taking of the Bodhisattva vow as being a starting point for the undertaking of the 6 paramitas? Do you see the taking?
Yes.
It is the beginning point.
It needs a formal commitment of some kind.
And so how do you go about taking the Bodhisattva vow? You just take it
You
on your
do
own?
it.
You just do it.
Could you say something about the use of talent as either a dissipation of energy or a distraction, or as an expression of the spiritual path?
Talent?
Yes.
Well, I don't see any problems with that. That's part of your makeup. And I think it should be part of your creativity in your path, rather than regarding it as something they should give up. It may be expression of your ego, but at the same time it is expression of your true nature at the same time. So I don't think one has to give up that particularly. And in fact, it would be too complicated to give up, or too trippy at some point. And one have to include everything what you have and combine everything as a part of your path.
I've been told that you were interested in making films, and that you made a film called Milarepa, and that the process that you've been following, as I understand it, is documentary. Are you
Is what?
Is a documentary approach.
Is what?
Documentary, filming tankas, as opposed to dramatic, using actors. Would you also be interested in making a feature film using actors and writing up a dramatic script? I've been writing scripts and feature films over the past 3 years, and
well, it seems that film, as I see it, is as twofold. It seems to be a expressive art and take advantage of the phenomenal world. And I think you could almost say it's happening right now here. And both of those. And that is my attitude and idea, is that you don't have to go out and step into a new situation and do it, but take advantage of what's there, what's materials there.
But a feature film situation exists in America. So to use that media to communicate with as a teaching would not be creating a new thing. New thing?
Well, I think that
films.
It is impossible to present a new thing because everything's being done that way.
What I'm trying to say.
I think the point is that presenting a certain Buddhist attitude to spaciousness and non-ego approach, that can be handled anyway. And that seems to be the heart of whatever creative art that we do, whether we do painting, silk screening, sculpturing, music, and film, acting, whatever we do, that there had to be a hollowness of some kind, which is a non-ego. But at the same time, that hollowness becomes very impressive, and somewhat it becomes very powerful.
Would you be interested in talking about doing a dramatic film version of Milarepa, for instance?
Well, I think we shouldn't divert our attention from people who are not particularly interested here. A lot of them are interested in the past.
I meant as a personal invitation afterwards.
Well, shall we see what happens? This topless gentleman.
Is taking the Bodhisattva vow simply taking a vow, or also a recognition of reality?
Can you repeat that? Taking Bodhisattva vow?
Vow, is it simply taking a vow, or also a statement of the recognition of reality?
Both.
Rinpoche, today you said we can't get any help. We have to do it ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today you said we can't get any help. We have to do it ourselves. At another time you said we need a guru. I find this conflicting.
That's a good question, actually. And the point here is that nobody can help you unless you are willing to help yourself. But the role of a guru is to tell you that. Gentleman in the turban.
Could you explain more of what you meant by being a warrior or soldier?
I beg your pardon?
Could you explain what you meant by being a warrior or soldier? Could you explain what you meant by being a warrior on the path?
Being warrior is not necessarily being soldier, but being warrior is fearless and willing to trot on the path. Are you Sikh? You're not? There are a lot of examples about the Sikh tradition of the 10th Guru, which is an ideal example of a warrior community still practicing spirituality. Maybe you should look into that. And particularly if you're wearing a turban, you should be Sikh.
I mainly wanted to know what you meant by it.
What?
I wanted to know mainly what you meant by it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't see any problems there, particularly. It's a question of being a warrior is fearless, not because you're fearless of enemies. You're fearless of certain particular things. It's different than saying that I'm not afraid of rattlesnakes. I'm not afraid of dogs. That's very dualistic and a very special kind of adolescent boy's approach, growing up into manhood. But when we talk about a basic warriorhood, we are talking about being bodhisattva, that willing to include everything and willing to work with everything without any fear. And even the fear itself is frightened by the bodhisattva's fearlessness.
Do you have to go through the Hinayana path before you take the Bodhisattva vow?
Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, there's nothing to be maha of. Nothing to be great open path, because you haven't experienced anything at all.
Is the Bodhisattva vow broken every time you do something?
Excuse me. What did you say?
Is the Bodhisattva vow broken every time you do something primarily for yourself? Is the Bodhisattva vow broken every time you do something primarily for yourself?
Yes.
Would you suggest not taking it until you're sure every action will be for others?
I suppose so. It's depends on you, particularly, your attitude, and it's very complicated to explain of particular prescriptions of how you should be bodhisattva, path follower. But it depends on how much holding back on you that you want to keep to yourself. And the more you have it, that less qualified you as a follower of the Mahayana path.
What are the consequences of breaking the Bodhisattva vow?
Consequences of what?
Of breaking the Bodhisattva vow.
Do you want to do it?
I'm afraid I do it already.
Well, the consequences there seem to be fairly definite and subtle, that you are stuck in your own practice, which becomes imprisonment, that you are stuck in your particular practice and you have no freedom to open yourself to the enlightenment experience. And moreover, that you'll be reduced into a dust, that you'll probably end up in intense experience of hell, or whatever you like to call that. That word hell is a very confusing word, but it's a state of complete state of claustrophobia, that you don't experience any sense of outlet, you don't have a way of expanding yourself or stepping out. The situations without the doors and the windows, you are in a concentrated state of being, which is painful, to say the least.
Rinpoche, in terms of the Hinayana path, if you're experiencing intense confusion or depression, do you suggest sitting at the time?
Yes.
That's the best thing to do.
That's the only way.
Thank you.
That's how everybody did in the past. And we can't modernize that. We got to do it in the old fashion. Well, maybe it's time to end this particular session. Thank you, everybody.